All right. Hey, everybody. My name is John Bower. I'm the CEO of Bonfire, and this is another episode of Around the Bonfire. And I'm with the great and powerful Sheri Killingsworth. Hello, Sheri. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, John?
I'm doing well. Now, Sheri, you have over 20 years in the multifamily space. Like every true Dallasite, you got your start at the Village and then worked for years with Lincoln Property Company, which became Willow Bridge. And I'm still, since, grew up and I didn't grow up in Dallas, but in my early 20s, lived at the Village myself. I still have a hard time translating from Lincoln to Willow Bridge. But anyway, tell me about yourself. How are you today? What's going on? What's new in your world?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm good. And yeah, I've been in marketing for a long time. I started marketing for the Village, which is a rite of passage for a lot of people whenever they move to Dallas.
Hmm.
And that's where I really got a love for brand and branding and marketing. It's where I learned multifamily marketing. Um, and yeah, I feel like I grew up with Lincoln. It's the only reason I even moved to Dallas. So I had to get out of Lubbock, Texas. So,
Yes.
um,
Well,
but yeah, but yeah, I feel like that's where I really loved. I fell in love with branding, and that's where I learned that brand was not about a logo or about a style book, a style guide, and it was all about a lifestyle.
mm,
Wasn't about a style guide, it was about a lifestyle and about an experience and creating an experience for residents. And it wasn't really about leasing apartments. Please don't tell Scott Wilder or John Horan that I said that.
we'll
It
tag
was
them.
but it was about creating this experience for people where they belong and that they loved living there, but they fit in and they wanted to be there. So it was all about
Mhm.
experience. And that's what this brand was. It was a culture um, of being a Dallasite.
Yes. So when we met a couple weeks ago, I was just kind of peppering you with questions and kind of watched how your kind of passion for this came up. So what stuck out to me was like what you were passionate about was about branding, you know, not only the actual multifamily group, but then the actual location, the apartment community for the resident and employee experience. Because what that brand does is help create a culture. The front of the house and the back of the house is what you had said, but how you maintain that in leadership. So, um, as you started in the space, as you started at the Village, what were some of the initial things that started shaping your mindset? Like, okay, branding is about an experience. It's about like an affinity or how you think and feel about this apartment community for the residents, but then also seeing how the employees played a part and then the leadership trying to hold it together. So, what were some of those first kind of aha moments, I guess, around how the brand impacts the resident experience and the employee experience?
I think it was whenever we were doing like events for employees and
Hmm.
tying the culture of the the Village and what we were trying to do for residents and that same lifestyle and that excitement and the active and the same culture and tying that into the things we were trying to do for employees so that it would carry on through. And so and communicating with employees the same way that we were communicating with residents, like in that same sort of tone and in that same sort of vibe. So and continuing that on through, whenever I moved up into corporate Lincoln and still having that very like kind of casual tone with employees that we had with residents because we didn't want to sound corporate. We didn't
Mm.
want to sound stuffy, like we were not approachable. It was very open door. Like you could reach out if you were a property manager, if you were a maintenance guy, if you were a leasing professional, like you could reach out to any of us, any VP, anybody in the corporate office, like you could email us, you could reach out, you could message us anytime. And so having that same tone of voice in the communications
Mhm.
and having those same type of like events that were very like relatable and having just like that same kind of culture really, really helps
Mm.
in the relatability, I think.
Yeah. So let's dive into, I kind of summed up our conversation, but three pillars for multifamily. So brand, resident, employee experience, and then leadership.
Mhm.
So we talked about this a little bit, but tell me about how do you define branding in multifamily? And if you don't mind, break it out between like Lincoln, Willowbridge, and then like the village. Like, what's the difference in branding the corporation versus the apartment community? So kind of define both of those if you don't mind.
So I would say that brand for the community, brand for the community is the emotional and moreover functional promise that we deliver to residents.
Say it one more
It's
time. Emotional over functional?
it's the emotional and functional promise that we deliver to residents, but
Mm,
moreover functional. It encompasses the value proposition for the property, and it's the resident experience, and it's the community's personality and that overall like vibe. And it's the story that we tell about the property and we how consistently that story is delivered.
mm. And then,
For
yeah, go up to the
yeah,
corporate level then.
and then for the corporate level, I would say it is for employees, it's the emotional promise that we deliver, how we're going to treat them, how we're going to take care of them, both employees and residents, what we're going to do to take care of them, because that's equally important. It's not so much the story. I mean, of course, we do have a story as a management company. Where do we come from? What are we about? What are our goals? I don't think a resident necessarily cares about our story so much as we're going to take care of them. You know,
Yeah.
they don't care where we're from. They just want to know that we're going to fix their shit when it's broken. You know,
Hmm.
but I think for employees, they want to know that we care and that we're going to take care of them, and that they want to know that they have a future with us,
Hmm.
and they want to know that our promise is something that we're going to deliver upon.
So I'd asked you this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and then just earlier before we started. But what's more difficult to brand? Is it the actual property, or is it for the corporation, the Gray Stars, the Lincolns, the Amleys? What's more difficult to brand?
I think I think a company is more difficult to brand because you have to take in brand values and this brand promise, and you have so many people in leadership positions that have to carry through and deliver upon that brand promise to all of these employees and to all of these residents. And it's an it's everyday work that they have to do.
Mm,
And you have to, so as a leader in corporate or regional position, and then going out to deliver on these brand promises and this deliver on these experiences and make sure that the on-site teams and the regional teams, everybody is feeling this culture is a big deal. It's a big thing to try to do so that the on-site teams they can deliver on a promise to the residents.
mm.
So it's a very trickle down process, and it's huge. It's huge, and it's a huge undertaking. So
Yeah. Oh, so many questions now that are coming into my mind. Um, so this is just kind of, we've talked about this a little bit, but if I'm a resident at the village, when you were working on site, or maybe when you moved up to the regional level, kind of worked your way up to corporate, what Did the people at the village know it was the Lincoln Property Company? No. I
No,
mean, did they talk about it? Did they care about it?
no. They just knew it was the
So
village.
yeah, the village. I mean, when you say the village, you in Dallas, you know exactly where it is, you
Yeah.
know what it's about as we're talking about. So
And it's had
that
such a revolution and evolution both since I was there. It's become a whole different animal. It's
mm,
seen so many different evolutions since the
mm.
beginning. Yeah. But
Okay, so taking the village aside, maybe another property that you oversaw, how do you balance like that unique story at a property level with the corporate story? Because you said, you know, it's trickled down, the leadership, the people there when they go out, whether it's a regional dealing with a vendor or whether it's some of the suits dealing with the investors, there's a trickle down there. So how do you balance something like the village, which will be vastly different than another, you know, community, whether it's in Oak Cliff or Frisco or in Arizona or, you know, St. Louis, whatever. How do you balance the property's unique story, the brand story, with the broader corporate identity?
I think there have to be synergies between the corporate brand and the property's individual story. And that's, I feel, usually around like the values, the the company's values, the core values. Like in Lincoln, at Lincoln, the core values were integrity, empowerment, respect, balance. And I think that whenever those are ingrained in the team and they treat those and carry those through, that's very, very important. And you can have those while you have this amazing local neighborhood story brand at the community. So, and there are some other things, right? Like customer service, you have pillars of customer service at every single community that are carried through. And I think a
Hmm.
great case study of something like this, if you look outside of multifamily, is Kimpton
Okay.
Hotels. So they have their mini brands of one, is what they call it, approach for the system where they have a master brand and it provides continuity and it doesn't cramp like the vibe and the style of all of their hotels. So, they have their customer service standards, and then they have different threads that you can find at all of their hotels.
Mm,
Like you'll be able to find yoga. They have this like whole wellness thing, but you can find yoga mats in every single room. You can find bikes at every single hotel that you
mm,
can like check out. You can call down to the front desk and you can get a plant up to your room at every single hotel. I think it used to be a goldfish, but they must have had something happen. So I don't know. Now it's a plant. I don't know.
yeah.
And they're, in some of their properties, they're partnering with um uh it's not Abercrombie, it's the other A. What is it? It's another,
I'm not so
I'm
good at retail
forgetting.
brands.
Oh, I'm just looking at it. Anyway, but it's like accessories. If you forget like sunglasses or a belt or a
Mm,
bag, they have like this little store where you can go and you can check out, this accessory.
mm.
And so they've partnered with this brand, Anthropology. That's what
Anthropology.
it is. um, and so they're starting this thing. So, and they have a whole like playbook for their employees so that they know how to incorporate all of the standards of the Kimpton brand and then layer on the new brand for their own
Hmm.
local hotel and all of the neighborhood things that they're supposed to do with their new restaurant that's very local to that neighborhood and to that market. So, um, yeah, I think Kempton is a great example of that.
Mm. So, well, some of the things that I picked up from what you just said is how the employees are delivering those values. So those values seem to be the thing that tie the corporate identity, the corporate brand, the corporate story to that local, unique community. So talk to me a little bit about resident experience and then also the importance of the employees having that experience. So how does resident experience, whether for good or ill, contribute to the brand? Like, so if you say we value, integrity or, open door or whatever else, or I think you call it not low key, but like a good vibe where it's like a welcoming vibe. People are coming into the village. So how does the resident experience, why does, maybe not how, but why does the resident experience matter to branding?
Well, if I think that a great resident experience only builds to the brand, and it helps the brand evolve. And a great resident experience is only going to help with resident reviews.
Hmm.
And it's only going to help with building those resident reviews and that reputation, and with that asset value, honestly, right? It's only going to help raise rents. It's only going to help with retention.
Retention.
And then on the other side of that, if the resident experience is continually poor, then the brand is going to start to erode. And then you're going to have to work on the brand, and you're going to have to potentially change it. Because, whenever you have a poor resident experience, you might have to rebrand completely. You might have to change direction, depending on what's happening.
Hmm.
If you have poor resident experience, it's going to reflect in your satisfaction scores. It's going to reflect in your reviews. It's going to reflect in retention. All of these things are going to happen, and it's going to affect your brand. So resident experience is really important to your brand. I don't see how it couldn't be.
So do you have any like good gossipy stories about a community that had such poor resident experience that the asset was either sold, or they're like, you know what, we're completely changing the name, maybe remove that persnickety employee that was, I don't know, constantly hindering a good resident experience. And then of course you have the residents that, sometimes there's always a bad apple that kind of ruins everyone's experience. But do you have any like actual, like real life examples of, man, the resident experience got so bad that we decided to either sell this asset and or, go ahead and change the brand or the name of it, try to change the vibe of it, anything like that?
Huh. Um, no, of course not.
Okay.
We didn't have anything like that. No, just
Never.
kidding. So I mean, we had examples of where resident experience was so bad with a particular service that we
Hmm.
had, you know, initiated with a vendor. And
Hmm.
we were not able to get rid of the vendor or get a new one because I believe it was the RPM, the regional property manager, had a relationship with the vendor. And so they did not want to get rid of them. So they were willing to just sacrifice all of that. And
Hmm.
so that was an issue. So, so you have things like that that happen, and you just have to kind of work through that
Hmm.
and go around them
Uh,
sometimes. But
and
like,
let the listeners notice
you have
she's
to,
not talking about Bonfire here. This was not
oh
us.
no, of course not. Oh my gosh,
Never.
no, no.
So tell me about, so resident experience is, important for retention, for satisfaction. Talk about, then go into the employee experience, like their own experience, because, I think in our conversation previously, I was reminded of Herb Keller, who didn't put the shareholders first, he put the employees first. And the culture, is obviously radically different from American Airlines or Delta, because he put the employees, they mattered more than the shareholders. And as a turn, they made money. They took on the, big boys and are, successful to this day. So yeah, talk to me about that as it regards to like on the property level, like bringing those values, how the employees are treated, how they're contributing or detracting to the brand experience. But why does that matter? Because you talked about the front door and the back door having being integrated in essence. So talk about that a little bit. Why does that matter?
Well, and I think it's proven if your employees are not happy, they're not going to treat residents well. You know, the saying, happy wife, happy life.
Mhm.
It's the same, happy resident or happy employee, happy resident, happy everybody,
Mhm.
it works the same, I feel like. Whenever your employees are treated well, they're going to treat residents and the people that are walking in the door well. And if they feel valued, they're going to make other people feel valued. It's just math. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's just girl math.
Yeah.
It you just that's just it's done. I mean, there's many studies done on how, you know, empowering your people to make decisions and helping them feel growth in their career and feel valued at work, helps them in the relationships and, continue on at work and, make
Carry on the
everybody feel
values.
valued. And it just makes such a huge difference.
So, I've always been a part of smaller organizations, so I can't imagine how difficult this is for something like even the village. I mean, it's like a city within a city. It's bigger than some small towns in Texas, right? And so
It's bigger than where I grew up. Yeah, actually.
yeah. So it, I kind of have in my brain, it's like, man, when you're trying to get the employee experience, they want to get the values, feel like they matter, or like there's a path for them to grow if they want. Like I can negatively interpret it as like something that Michael Scott would do at the office to try and get everyone fired up while they're just, doing the look at the camera, like Jim would do or whatever. So we know it's important. We know that people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to feel like their work matters. But it can border on like, I'm not saying this happened with you, but like I can just see how it can border on, cheesy a little bit, or
Yeah.
like you're like, we get on the LinkedIn lunatics and we can see people hyping up their brands and their employees going out, to their leadership conference, and they get the swag and everything else. And so it's fun and exciting. But I feel like it would be difficult to make it actually authentic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so speak to that a little bit, and then we'll kind of move into the leadership side of it, because it seems to be that's what you kind of honed in on, is like, in order to make that happen, it has to come from the leaders. But how do you prevent it? Like, if you've got someone that's just starting out as a leasing manager or whatever else, of a huge group that's got over 100,000 beds all over the U.S. or units, how how does it stay authentic? I guess the brand coming down to that new person, wide-eyed out of college, let's say, towards like, hey, you matter, but you also got to get these beds filled. You know what I mean? You got to
Yeah.
get these heads in beds. So how do you do that in an authentic way? That seems overwhelming at times, just thinking about it.
Yeah. Um, well, I feel like it goes back to the type of communication,
Hmm.
and it it also goes back to being very thoughtful in the whenever you're talking about to the swag and the tchotchkes and all of that kind of stuff that you're giving out, you being very thoughtful and authentic in that and making sure that it's just not crap.
Hmm.
And you're just not doing stuff to do it and to check the box. And there has to be a lot of thought that goes into it. And I know I'm just saying that, but like, for instance, so whenever, so like I was in charge of doing our events for our marketing team, right?
Hmm.
Whenever we would have conferences and whatever, little marketing meetings, smaller marketing meetings for our marketing team. And
Hmm.
we had one in Charleston, for instance. And we had a meeting, we would have night events, right? And we had one, like at each event, we would like theme each event.
Mhm.
And one was at night, and it was overlooking the river, and it had an amazing view, and it was going to be like you could see the stars, and it was mostly female was the group. And so we had different vendors come in, and I knew this group very, very, very well, right? And so we were doing different gifts for the group and different like entertainment, whatever, experiences, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So we had someone there who was reading your like birth chart, because we had so many people who were very, very into that. And plus it was out on the stars, right?
Mhm.
Somebody reading your birth chart. Then we had a local Charleston jeweler there who was doing permanent jewelry, because it was very, very popular at the time. And
I've never
everybody
heard
loved
of
that.
that.
Yeah.
I'll
It's just
Google
like
it.
a bracelet or a ring, or what. It's not like attached to your body. And then we had another one that was like, another local Charleston um, uh, business that you could create your own scent, your own like perfume that was there. So it was like very local. It's all, it was tied back to like the theme of the meeting, and tied to everybody that was in the group. So it all is very like thoughtful, tied to the meeting, tied to moments that matter. So that's the difference, right?
Hmm.
They weren't getting cups, and they weren't getting jackets, and they weren't getting these types of things. They were getting things that were going to really have a memory for them. And it was tied back to something. It was an experience, and it was tied back to Charleston. It was tied back to them being all together. So it's very thoughtful. I'm not going to say it was demure. We're
Very
over. That's
mindful.
over. Right.
Oh,
That's
sorry, I didn't
over.
know that. I didn't
Um,
quite know it
but
was in.
yeah, so that's the difference, right? Whenever you're trying to create brand and culture, and tie things together for people, and make them remember and feel like they belong.
So go back a little bit. So thoughtfulness, it's almost like kindness. You're thinking about someone else, what would be meaningful, which is not easy because most people I know, present company excluded, selfish is kind of like written over my head. I'm just thinking about me and what I'm going to do and all this other jazz. But what you're saying is in order to get the resident experience to work, you have to see the leadership be thoughtful towards their employees, have a measure of kindness for them. And there's always a tension because like the goal, we're here to make some money, right? Like
Yeah.
we're here to like it's not good if occupancy is at 60%. It's and so like there's this like you got to make money, you've got to do the work, you've got to do the grind, you've got to make the cold calls, you've got to do all this stuff. But at the same time, you're saying in order for that resident experience to work, there's got to be an employee experience through thoughtfulness, some connection, intentionality, which is hard when it's like go 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 go. I need the best vendor here. I need to get my heads in beds. We got to get this event planned. It's not time to be demure and very, what is it? Very
Yeah.
mindful.
Mindful.
That's not easy in America, not in Dallas. DFW is
Right.
like, let's go. Maybe in Fort Worth,
Right.
Cowtown. So I want to hear more about the communication, the type of communication, because in my experience as a leader, it's like they do want an authentic leader. They want to know someone that can lead, kind of can take control, provide security, a plan, a path. But on communication, talk about that a little bit more and how it ties into employee experience. Because in my experience, they want more than is probably appropriate to share. Because some things are behind closed door, and I don't mean like something shady. I just mean like you don't share everything. Like I don't share everything with
Right.
my kids. Like about a financial issue or a medical issue. You kind of share what is appropriate. So
Mhm.
talk to me what you mean by like the types of how they communicate, types of communicate. How does that why does that matter? How do you do it well so that there's a good employee experience?
I feel like you have to be transparent to a point, and people want to know more than you think that they want to know.
Oh, for sure.
And if you don't give them a narrative, they're going to create it.
Mm.
And that's really important to remember. And as we were going through this whole change and the whole transition between Lincoln and Willowbridge, whenever the acquisition was happening, that some of that was occurring, right? Because if we weren't giving people a narrative and we weren't telling them what was going on, they were creating it in their own mind. And not that anything was not that anything shady was happening or anything was happening at all. We didn't have any information, but even if there is no information to give, you still have to tell them there is no information. There's nothing happening right now. Like you have to be very communicative and upfront and authentic about it, about anything. I mean, people now are accustomed to finding information whenever they want to find it. And so it's just better to be upfront and as transparent as you can be.
As is appropriate. That's my favorite phrase. As is appropriate. So I think we talked offline about different, suppliers, different groups, and how like they do evolve. We all kind of change and move. We are all evolving and changing in our character and our personality and how we grow. But oh my goodness, I just lost my train of thought. You said, what it seems to be difficult for that authentic to where you're not just getting the suits, right? The money is saying we value our employees. So talk to me like the practical nature of maybe as like a regional vice president communicating to their team on the ground. Are we talking about how they're communicating via email, their kind of group meetings like where you're out in Charleston? But talk to me about the functionality of communication, like practically, what do you mean? Like saying best regards at the end of an email? What do you mean about like tell me practically how to communicate well from when you experienced as a leader where you're and you're like, okay, that went really well, or maybe something that came down because no leader's perfect. I mean, Scott Wilder's a great guy, but I'm sure he's blown it communicating from time to time. I've led for a lot of my adult life and I've screwed up infinitely. So talk to me about how that communication works. Give me some examples. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, are they smiling? Practical communication tips, best practices. How about that?
Tips. I think that, nobody communicates, not everybody communicates the same or listens the same. So you can shoot emails all day and half the people are not going to open it and they don't read it. They don't care. It's just the way it is. I mean, it is what it is. I'm sorry. So the best way is to send and have the messages delivered in a couple of different ways, and that's through email and to have it posted on like an intranet, and then to also have it delivered like via like a Zoom, right? If it's like a town hall or something, so you have it like
omni-channel,
but not right? So have it in a bunch of different ways. So you feel like I've already said that. I don't want to say it again because people are sick of me saying it. Well, there are probably 60% of your audience that you thought you were reaching didn't even hear you the first time. So
or even comprehend it.
No, they didn't understand
like
it. Or they only heard half
of
it, or they thought that you said something else. So that's the biggest thing. And I think that
consistency.
Another thing, consistency. I think another thing is that, don't ever underestimate the power of being out on site and with your team members, or thinking that they don't want to hear from you or they don't want to see you, because they do. Like, it means a lot to people for you to be there in person.
Mhm.
and just to talk to them.
Mm.
Like they
One of the
actually do
things
want to see you.
I I I agree with that. And, in our post-COVID world, I've done so many Zoom calls. I was so glad to actually have a face-to-face coffee with you, a couple weeks ago. But and our team is pretty remote. We've got people in Australia and in Austin and in Tyler. I mean, they're just all over. So it's
I
hard.
just love how you compare, like, oh, we have team members in Australia and Tyler, Texas. It's
It's the
same thing.
same thing. But what you said is so right. It's like even if they're like if you're on the team, you want to know what's going on from the leaders or those they want some kind of response. And I've learned this concept through a thing called attachment theory. It's like our brains are actually wired um, to want to be with someone that wants to be with us. Like you want someone that's glad to be with you. Um, and so it's like not just showing up begrudgingly on site saying, you're at 87%. What the H are you doing here, guys? But like,
Yeah,
okay, hey, I'm in it with you. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm glad to be with you. And that seems like that shapes because not every property that you oversaw was doing well. Not every quarter from the sales perspective goes well for us. There's issues that we all face. So what I'm hearing you say is that consistent communication, and then like being with them from time to time, because you can't do it all the time. But when you're with them,
right.
it's like my experience that when you're glad to be with them, it literally changes the atmosphere, the environment that you're in. And so that's
Yeah.
huge. So one more thing on this. So you talked about how the story, how the brand, that local community is so important, how you get it from the corporate through the values down to the local community, right? To that apartment community. So the residents are having a good experience, but then also how those employees have to have it too. So you emphasize this a couple times in our conversation, our previous conversation, but leadership. We've already touched on it a little bit, but talk to me about how leadership um, really helps drive that front door and back door employee resident experience. Tell me about the importance of it. Some stories about it. Why does that matter?
I think that, it's so important to maintain like the brand integrity and to it just sets the tone for how employees deliver the brand experience, and strong leadership ensures, consistency. Leadership needs to be on the same page,
Oh,
hopefully, about the brand.
getting a book. Keep
And
going.
need to be on the same page about through communications and operations and how they handle, not necessarily how they handle challenges, but that they do handle challenges and that they don't just sweep them under the rug or sweep them away, you know?
Yeah.
And, I think that's so important that leadership is a united front and that the teams see that.
Mhm. So it's so interesting what we're talking about because, as a supplier, as a vendor, I'm trying to I'm trying to make money off of you by hopefully giving your residents a better experience. Like that's one of our MOs is like as our company, it's like we want the resident experience to go well. But oh, I get so excited and I lose my train of thought. But when I'm like, hey Sheri, look, this is why you should try Bonfire because we're going to really help increase NOI. You're going to get ROI from our product, but that doesn't have anything to do with culture. You know what I mean? And so this is something that you don't really see on the bottom line. Like everybody right now is talking about centralization. Rates are up. There's not a lot of deal velocity and multifamily. It's starting to pick up a little bit, and and it's hard to like quantify the efficiencies on your P&L and on your balance sheet. And so culture, you don't, I mean, you might get your NPS score, your customer satisfaction, but it's hard to translate that numerically. But you're saying that it's important for those leaders to carry that. Otherwise, whether they like it or not, that NOI starts dropping. They're not going to start getting return on investment. That's kind of what I'm processing as you're talking.
Yeah. So, two, you're all of what you do too. It's like you're helping deliver on the brand promise, which is experience for the resident. Um, Culture, making it does have to do with culture, and that it is about experience and making sure that they're happy and that they're having an easier time at work so that they can focus on other things aside from old school communication and manual things, right? Yeah, so that's how that all fits in, I would say. But leadership does need to focus in on that piece of it.
Hmm. So you said about leadership, like being on the same page.
Mhm.
I, I was trying to find my Patrick Lencioni, what is it, the four objectives of an obsessive CEO or something. And the first one is build and maintain a unified leadership team. And it is so hard. That is the hardest thing I've ever done in any leadership role, is having leaders on the same page, because you can get in fights or you just get distant. You go off into your, silo. I go off into mine. We're grinding, we're doing work.
Right.
So talk about how you've seen it done well, where like that team, that leadership team is united around what? Around the profitability, around the mission, around the vision, around the culture. Earlier we were talking, I was looking up the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mhm.
So how have you seen, how have you let out, how have others around you let out to help keep the leadership team on the same page?
Um, yeah, I think that whenever I was with Lincoln, whenever it was Lincoln, and we had like the VP of, it was like marketing, pricing, VP of marketing, VP of pricing, VP of like the
All of them.
department heads, I would say. And we would all work together and meet regularly to make sure that we knew what everybody was working on, what projects were going on, making sure that we were all moving in the same direction. Um, and that all just goes back to communication,
Mm,
right? And making sure that we were moving towards being more efficient for our teams, making sure that our teams were able to be more efficient by the processes and the technologies that we were putting into place. Um, and we were helping them. But that, it really all just went back to communicating and being able to work well together and liking each other a lot, which we did. We worked really well together. So we were very fortunate to have a great team. But yeah, it was really open communication, and we would travel together to visit properties and meet with regions together. We wouldn't just like go out on our own. We would make a concerted effort to do things together.
mm.
So that makes a difference.
Man, we didn't have these scripted here, so these are not some of the questions, but I'm fascinated by this. So two things you said. Number one is like each other. I mean, sometimes my wife and I don't like each other. She told me once, she said, I love you, but right now I don't like you.
I don't like you very much.
Yes. And I was like, I don't blame you. But man, that's actually, that's like a feeling word, right? That's not numbers.
Right.
But that seems to matter. And then you said it again, because you said like being on site with your team, but then the intentionality that would take from a leadership team that have got all of these different people coming up to them and asking for questions. We're going to take the time, which is, in my opinion, is like your number one resource. It's time. It's like that's the most valuable asset we have. That's fascinating. Taking the time to go, and hopefully with people that you like. Um, yeah, that almost sounds like a minor miracle if you could both get everybody there, but not only get everybody there, but they're glad to be there and they like each
Right.
other.
Right. You're on a mission, you have a purpose, and you're actually having a good time while you're doing it. It is a little bit of, like sounds like a unicorn, but it's, driven by purpose,
Hmm.
and you want to do great things for the people because you have a loyalty to not just the company, but you have a loyalty to each other.
Mm-hmm. Oh, preach. Okay, we've got a few minutes left here. Let me transition on that loyalty part. So we know when we talk about like, the Apple people versus the Android people, and they're really loyal to it, or maybe Nike versus Adidas or Reebok or whatever. And at one point, my son had some Adidas on. I'm like, we're a Nike family. I'm like, what am I
How
talking
dare
about?
you?
And I know, but like neuroscience shows that like when you start to attach to a brand, it's like a family member, right? Which is insane to think Nike's this multi-billion dollar corporation is a part of my family. That's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. But so you're talking, we know that like effective branding will lead to customer loyalty, and that's crucial for success, right? And you talk about the difficulty, like residents don't know, care possibly about LPC or Willow Ridge, but they care about the village, let's say. But knowing how in multifamily it can be transient, like you can move, or you're at a starter, like you're starting out in your 20s, you move to Dallas, you're going to live here, and then your job moves, so you pop up to the next apartment up the way. So how do you build brand loyalty on site given how transient residents can be?
It's hard. That's difficult, I think. It's a lot easier with something like tennis shoes,
Mm,
right? And, um, blazers and, jewelry and stuff like that. But I some brands, some multifamily brands have been able to do it whenever they have like a lot of density in an area or a city, I think. Um, Others that don't have such density, it's much harder. Um, but I think if you can build a great brand and you can create loyalty, then even if your residents may move, they may still move back at some point. They may still, because they have a connection, they have memories. If we can create those experiences that are strong enough connections, if we've created a good enough or a great enough social circle there, right,
mm,
for them, either they might come back or they'll refer, or they've left really great reviews, which is also going to help us. So that's all very helpful, even if they don't stay. So I think there are all these other ancillary kind of benefits from building great brands, even if that resident, that one household doesn't stay.
mm.
So I don't think we can help, whether or not they stay or not, because so many people do move for family,
Job,
for jobs, for just there's so many different things. They've outgrown, they have kids, there's a million different reasons why people move, and a lot of the time you can't keep them. Whether, I mean, they could be very happy in the
right?
apartment home, and there's just, um, it's not because they hate us.
Yeah,
It doesn't have anything to do with
it's
that.
just
But
life.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of other reasons, and that we could still gain favor after they move. So
Mm. So I know you're now doing some brand and marketing consulting, right? Um, and so, like, if you're making a pitch, you're trying to get someone to see a problem, or they've asked you about a problem that they've got and you've identified it. When you think about the return on investment when it comes to, let's say, enhancing the brand, crafting the story, seeing those values align to the front of the house, to the back of the house, all the way up to corporate, um, where, like, if you're selling me, where are you putting your money? You're like, hey, look, I guess maybe what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Hey, the story's off, or let's go put, like, the story doesn't matter as much. Let's get the advertising dollars. We just need to get brand awareness out. So uh, not necessarily we're at the logo and the colors, but just saying, look, we need to be on, uh, all the ILSs and on Zillow, and then where else you might advertise. And so let's spend more dollars there. Where's your better ROIs? Like, let's build that brand, let's reestablish it, let's cultivate it, and or let's just go spend some more money and just get it out there on Facebook and on the ILSs and whatnot. Where's the greater ROI when it comes to branding versus advertising?
I think it really depends on what the issue is, and you're not going to know what the issue is until you get in and do a deep analysis on it and see what the reviews are, what the leads look like, are they responding to leads, what the property looks like itself,
Hmm.
what's the online presence look like. Like there's so many different variables that once you do that analysis, then it's going to be better. I would never say that, yeah, you need to put all your money in social. That's not the answer, but and yeah, there's always things that you can do to hype up the brand, sharpen up the brand, and then also a spend for digital. I don't know about putting all of your money in an ILS, but it does also depend on the market that you're in and what
Hmm.
your goals are. And, it really depends. But first is an analysis, what's happening at that property and what people are seeing online and what's that experience whenever they're looking at your property online.
So it's complicated.
Just go with
Uh, I'm like, that's where I'm like, just make it easy for me to understand. Okay.
it.
So kind of like some closing thoughts, kind of move towards maybe the future a little bit, maybe some advice. So thinking about like if you could go back in time to tell yourself, hey, here's what you need to be aware of. Here's where you need to like thinking about branding, resident experience, employee experience. So those marketing professionals that are getting into multifamily now, right? Um, what advice would you give? What would you give them to think about when they're thinking about developing not their personal brand, but rather like I'm a part of this team now, and I've been, given charge over this 1,000 unit community. What advice would you give them around that branding, that experience, that resident and employee experience? What advice would you give yourself or them?
um, to not be too trendy whenever you're looking at like brand as far as um, like the ID, right? The identity of the brand, to not follow trends, like,
Mm.
but to be authentic and to really focus on experiential marketing and to really drive creating social circles for the residents and
Connection.
connectivity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's so funny because when I first started multifamily, everything was a luxury apartment. Um, yeah, luxury apartments. I'm like, dude, I'm making like $30,000 a year. There's no luxury here. I'm not looking for luxury. Yeah,
I have
just
a futon,
remove that.
okay?
Yeah, yeah. No, I had a Craig. I don't know what I had, but it wasn't Craigslist. Not that. Maybe my futon was Craigslist, but all right. But that goes back to like what's going on site. That goes back to what's the actual corporate values that are getting translated down to that employee and what's that story, and not necessarily looking to the world. Yeah, you want to find the trends and something innovated, but like not. It's not a copy paste thing. It's unique.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And then two questions because I want to get people to connect to you here in a minute. But here, I mean, we got AI now. Centralization is a big hip word. And in it was AI everything. Last year it was centralization. But when it comes to branding and resident experience, if you can look into the future, what do you see in the next 5 to 10 years? What's the future of branding and resident experience in your opinion?
So I think for the resident experience, it's going to be a huge focus on personalization
Mm,
for the resident. And I think with AI, it's going to be so much easier for personalization for the resident because, AI in 3 to 5 years is going to be so commonplace and easy for us. It'll be so easy for that. And then with technology, AI also with the technology piece, but it's going to play even much more, even a bigger role, the technology piece in having connectivity for the resident in the building, in their apartment with their phone, just being connected to all of the other residents to the building, which makes it much harder to,
Leave.
right? If you're so attached, like, oh, I have everything. I'm right here. I'm so connected to all of my friends that live here and the building. Oh, what a pain in the ass it's going to be to move. But yeah, I think that personalization, that's going to be so much bigger, and the technology,
Hmm.
and residents are going to be so connected to their neighbors in their homes. So brands that they could create these genuine connections, those are really the ones that are going to thrive.
And the personalization makes total sense. And I'm overwhelmed with the thought of how technology is a facilitator for connection, for genuine human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's good. So just as we get out of here, uh, Sheri, I know that you've got opportunities in front of you. You're doing some branding and marketing consulting, but how do people get a hold of you if they want to tell you their story so that you can give them some, you know, financial advice, paid advice, let's say, but how do they connect to you?
You can just find me on LinkedIn. Just
Yeah.
message me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
All right. LinkedIn. Okay. Sheri, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for going with me on this because you'd say start saying stuff and I'm just all over the place. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Let's get another coffee soon. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you guys.